Welcome back to the Own It podcast. My name is Dion, and in today's episode, we're talking all things building and pest inspections. We've got Colin on. How are you, mate?
Hello. Good, thank you.
That's good, mate. I think a lot of people, or a lot of my clients that are listening to this, or potential clients, would have heard of your name before because people reach out. Hey, do you know a good building and pest inspector? And I try to send them your way, mate.
Thanks for that.
Because
I appreciate it.
Well, I think you're very good at what you do, mate, and that's the main thing. There will be people out here, though, that haven't even heard of what a building and pest inspector is and don't even know about this stage in the process. So probably a great place to start is, what is a building and pest inspector? And, what do you do?
Well, we're engaged by home buyers, advocates, investors, all sorts of people who want to purchase a property. Now, it's a part of the due diligence to work out what you're buying. Now, it always baffles me that people will spend $1 million, $2 million, sometimes $10 million on a property, and they'll look at it. They'll go to the first open, may go to the second open. Lucky they probably won't go to the third open, and they'll spend $1 million plus. Do your due diligence. Get us to go through. Get an inspector to go, a good inspector to go through, and check that property out from top to toe. Know what you're buying. Know the hidden secrets.
Because what people and some buyers don't realize, it's buyer beware. Well, at the time of purchase, you're buying the property for what it is. So it's not, and a lot of buyers go at their final inspection, oh, can they fix this? Can they fix that? Can they do this? And it's like, no, that's not what the final inspection's for. That's for what you're meant to do before you actually purchase a property. You need to understand the ins and outs of a property before you put pen to paper.
Correct.
And we've seen, I mean, we might even chat about it a little bit later. Like, we've seen some horror stories and properties you've inspected for clients of ours that I walk through, and I walk through a lot of properties every single weekend. And some of these things aren't visible to the naked eye. Like, you've got some pretty funky tools and all of that as well. But I mean, what's some of the most common issues you find in Melbourne, or even anywhere really? What's some of the most common issues you find in homes? Hidden ones maybe, or just visible ones?
Sure. So every house has something. I'm still out there. We've been doing this for in excess of 15 years, and I'm still looking for the unicorn, the house that has no defects. And that's even in a brand new property.
Yeah.
We always find something. Building isn't a perfect art. Houses move. So one of the most common things we'll find in a house is seasonal movement. So door frames won't be working properly, or the doors will stick. You'll get a little cracks here and there. They're your common things. Moisture. So
which is the worst, by the way.
Which can be the worst. So I'm a registered waterproofer. We specialise in all sorts of water issues, leaks, the whole lot. And yes, once water finds its way to an area that it shouldn't be in, it can be disastrous.
Yeah.
So showers, balconies are probably your worst. Drainage and ventilation around a house, that's when you're getting really bad. I inspected a house the other day, and it was completely clad to the ground with that old asbestos cladding, which is of its era. But there was one area like that, one little tiny hole in the side of the building. And I didn't even know what I was doing. I got a red camera, my little red camera, and I stuck it under there and went click, 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 click. And that's all I was going to get. When I got back to the office and I blew those photos up, it was a swamp.
Right.
An absolute swamp under there.
Poor ventilation.
No drainage.
Yeah.
There could have been pipes leaking.
Yeah.
Water coming in under the house for many years. The stumps were absolutely gone.
Yeah.
And no one would have known about it. You couldn't even get on your belly in that to have a decent look.
Yeah.
I had to literally put my arm under carefully because it was all asbestos as well. Click, 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 click.
Yeah.
And that's how we found that disaster.
I think that's also something I should jump in and say. Not all building and pest inspectors are the same. Obviously, you just mentioned before, qualified, was it waterproofer?
Yeah, we're registered building practitioners specialising in waterproofing and moisture issues.
Yeah.
You can be all sorts of different sorts of building qualifications. I've got my diploma as well. Yeah. I've got a couple of other inspectors that work with me, and they have other technical skills. Yeah. But the key takeaway is that you've been around, you know what you're doing, you're a registered building practitioner, and you've really got to use that big brain as well as have a process, a very methodical process.
The registered building practitioner part is so important, because what people don't understand is if you sign subject to a building pest inspection, that is in the clause. You have to use a registered building practitioner, because if you don't, and you get a report, there's a major defect, you send that to the other side, and you're not if you're not registered, bad luck, because it's not the clause.
It's not actually a requirement to be a registered building practitioner to do this. There's no actual criteria as such. But in the REIV contracts, they have put it in there because there was a lot of people getting around, I'm a building inspector today.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of houses not getting inspected properly, a lot of deals dropping off for real estate agents. So they went to the Law Institute. They said, we've got to straighten this out. So they came up with a clause that said, basically, and I'm paraphrasing, that you need to be a registered building practitioner.
Yep.
Now, the ones that aren't, there's some great inspectors out there that aren't registered building practitioners. But if they find a major building defect, what'll happen is, it does happen often, is a phone call will be made from the seller's solicitor that'll basically say, I'm looking for your registration. You've put a major defect on this house. I can't find it. I'm not a registered building practitioner, but it's a major defect. Sorry, you haven't met the criteria of the clause of the contract.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, that can be very precarious because usually there's a time limit on when these inspections have to be done. And if that expires, it's basically gone unconditional because the vendor or the buyer has got the wrong type of inspector.
Spot on. And I think as well, like, I don't even know if you remember when we met, because it just came back to me in my memory just then. We met when you did a building pest inspection for a property in Blackburn, and this was like 5 years ago. And I remember seeing all your thermal gear. Like, it was a big house, but you went through it in about 3 hours. I'd done like hundreds of building and pest inspections before that. You were the longest by far. Most, I would say, are done in 30 to 60 minutes, which is scary to think.
Yeah.
We would only allocate an hour of our time aside for a building pest inspection. And we thought that's worst case because most building pest inspectors fly through. They just, not all, but some, I should say, go through and just do it quite quickly, and they don't go through and look at absolutely everything. So that's why I say not all building pest inspectors are the same. And that's why I got your business card.
Yes.
That's why I started using it, because at the time I was like, I want your business card because when I buy something, I want to use you. So you can take it from someone that's seen a lot of them. They're not all the same. Can you, I just obviously explained you at the property for 3 hours. Can you tell us, what's the process? Like, what do you do during those 3 hours? Because you don't just walk through and eyeball stuff and go, it looks all right. Like, there's a process to it. There's an art to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't all take 3 hours. Yeah. We allocate around 2 hours to do an inspection with an extra hour up our sleeve should we need it.
That was a bigger house.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if it's big or small. I can do a large house in 2 hours, or I can do a tiny 3-bedroom I did in West Melbourne. It still took me 2 hours, and it was only a 2-bedroom place.
Yeah. A lot of problems?
Yeah. Well, not so much a lot of problems, but a lot to report on. So it's a methodical process. Yeah. And I've trained all my inspectors to do it exactly the same way. And if you're doing it that way, you won't make a mistake.
Yeah.
So we break it down into little pieces. I often say to people, if you get a jigsaw puzzle and you throw it on the table, it's all these little pieces. And eventually you're going to put them all together and it's going to make one big picture. So we inspect similar to that.
Yeah.
So we break it down room by room, element by element. So we're looking into a room, for instance, and we'll go, right, walls. Okay. So we inspect the walls. There could be a massive crack there. There might be a hole in the floor there, but I'm not looking at any of that. My whole sole focus at that point
is the walls.
Yeah. Once I've noted all the defects in the walls, I'll go ceilings and then floors and then walls, and then windows, and et cetera, et cetera. A lot more in the kitchens, a lot more in the bathrooms. But if you do it like that, and there's a bit of a tip for other inspectors, you won't get it wrong.
Yeah.
You'll do a methodical process. Same thing when you go on the outside. I can walk around a house and then I'll walk around it again. I've actually had instances, and it's happened more than once, because I'm hugging the building as I'm going around. And then as I'm going back around the house, looking at everything other than the building, I'll go, oh my God, there's a pool there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So breaking it all down into little pieces. And at the end of it, you've built one big picture.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. I mean, a lot of I guess a lot of buyers, when they reach out, it's always, "Oh, do you know a building pest inspector?" The next question is like, "How much should I allocate, or what would they charge?"
Mm.
And again, how long's a piece of string? It's also, you never know. It's always property dependent. But maybe just to give people a ballpark on
Sure.
maybe an amount they could a guide that they could put aside if they are to buy a property.
Sure.
Yeah.
We would think that an average would be around between $600 and $1,000,
Yep.
depending on price, location, and condition. The worst thing that any purchaser can do is base their inspection or their inspector on price,
Yeah.
because I can charge you $1,000 and go through in half an hour, or I can charge you $600 and still take the 2.5 hours. You really need to know where your good hard-earned money's going. But if someone says, "Oh no, I'll do it for $300,"
Mm.
get some alarm bells up. Do a bit more research. They may be great, but they may be not.
Yeah. There's a reason they have to win the business by
Yeah.
charging a lower fee.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's there's some great guys out there. Don't get me wrong. I'm focusing on the negatives here, which is guys that are either starting out or not as good or just don't care.
Yeah.
They're using volume. So they're doing 4 and 5 a day,
Mm.
sometimes 6 a day. Whereas we'll do, myself and my other inspectors, we allocate no more than 2 a day.
Yeah.
We may throw a third one in when an advocate
That's when I'm ringing you going,
comes in
"Mate,
and says,
last minute,
"Please,
help me."
please." We may throw a
Yeah.
third one in there, but it's not just the 2 hours we're spending on site. It's travel time. It's back in the office. We reassess everything in the office as well, from the photographs, from the 300 photographs that we'll take. We'll re-inspect that whole property from those photographs. So there's a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of care that goes into the entire process.
Even what you were saying before about there's a process, right? Even when you read those reports, you can see the process because you go through every single point, and it's the same with every single report. It's the same with the amount of photos. If you see the reports, and I've had clients, by the way, by themselves at the start, they're searching by themselves. They use another reporter. They come to me, and then they'll use you because I'll recommend you. So they're the ones that see multiple reports. I've seen multiple reports too, but they're the ones that go, "Wow, we're so much happier. We're more glad that we've actually invested more money into a proper inspector." Because at the end of the day, if you can find something wrong with a property, it is only to the buyer's benefit or my benefit as well, because A, we can use it as leverage to negotiate a better price, or secondly, we can get out of a contract and dodge a lemon.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, those reports that we provide, we designed them ourselves.
Yeah.
We designed the process, and it's very similar to the way that we inspect, like you said. We want them to be able to read it. Like we're doing it for doctors, lawyers, labourers, cooks, cleaners. It doesn't matter. I'm standing in their shoes when I'm reading their reports, and I'm going, "You know nothing about construction, but I've got to impart this knowledge into your lap so that you know whether it is a good decision to buy that property or not." And there's always the conversation afterwards. We're more than happy to go through any points, any extra. We can elaborate on any of the findings once they've had a good look through the report.
Yeah. And so many times couldn't even count. Have you found a major defect for a client of ours on a property? Now, I think the thing to consider is that doesn't necessarily mean, "Hey, we're just going to pull out of this contract straight away," because quite often it's hey, there's a major defect, but this is how you can fix it. And then it's over to you as a buyer on if you want to exit the contract, or the best leverage you can possibly have is then going back to the vendor and saying, "Well, actually, we want a reduced price now because we have to factor in these works." And to the vendor moving forward, that's a material fact. They have to disclose that moving forward. So they're scared to lose you as a buyer, and you've got ammunition to get out of the contract. And that's where we see clients all the time buying properties for better prices because they've invested in a good building pest inspector and you've found something. But there's also going to be the other side of it where there's things that are really bad, and are there things that are so bad you'd be like, "Hey, don't even negotiate a price, just leave it"? Are there some really big red flags?
Well, we don't get into that side of things with the negotiation. We really try not to. We want the clients to make up their own minds on that, but they really should be having someone like yourself to guide them through. Engage someone who can help them through the decision to buy or not to buy, because that's not our role.
Yeah.
Our role is to give them as much information as property as
possible.
possible. But we're not there to say, don't buy that property.
Yeah.
Buy that property, because I can't make that decision for them, but we'll support them all the way through.
Yeah.
But if they've got someone like you who can guide them, who can renegotiate, then that's where your role comes into it, and that comes into it perfectly.
I'm currently jumping into today's episode just to ask a massive favor. If you could please leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, we would greatly appreciate it. Now, back to today's episode. Well, everyone's risk tolerance is different. And that's what I've realized over time. Sometimes I'll have clients that are more bullish, like we really like this property, and I'll be telling them about something that I think is pretty bad.
Yep.
And they're like, nah, how much is it going to cost? Like, let's problem solve. That's great. Like they want the property as a way to get it. And the other times you've got clients when it's like, hey, it's a somewhat straightforward, simple fix. Like we can get a discount on price. But obviously the question at the same time is, do you want to take that on? Is there still something you want? And the answer might be no. And that's also fine. Like that's why there's not like a blanket rule on, hey.
It's not. Like we like a win-win situation. Yeah. We like a win-win for our buyers, but also for the sellers, because it's such an emotional process.
Correct.
Wouldn't it be great and a happy home for the next buyer who goes into that home if it's a nice transaction? Yeah. If we find a major defect at a property, then if that whole process can be, okay, this is how you fix it. We found some structural damage. Here's a structural engineer. Here's an X. Here's a Y. Here's a Z. And then you can go to your clients and say, right, we can string this all together. The seller gets to sell their house. The buyer gets to buy the house. It's a win-win for everybody, including the agent and an advocate.
Spot on, 100%. And
that happens often.
All the time. And what also happens often is people not getting building and pest inspections, and then a year or two later, this problem growing in the background gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And then that's when, instead of maybe not a simple fix, but a costly fix to begin with, becomes very expensive fix. I mean, something you always say and I always say to my clients when you send me the report, you always say there's a bit of a to-do list. I really like that. I send the reports to the clients. I'm like, hey, there's a bit of a to-do list, and it's a great way to look at it. It's like, when you move into a property you've never lived in before, you have no idea about anything in it. This is a little list of things you can do once you've moved into the property over time to get to a condition that is A+.
Correct.
I mean, a lot of these issues we're talking about major structural issues, but there's also sort of minor defects or cosmetic issues. I mean, what's the difference?
Well, this is a very good point as well, because we can find, say, $50,000 plus worth of minor defects. Now, in the Australian standard, we can only work with two types of defects. They're either major defects, and then everything else is a minor defect. So it's like dropping off a cliff, really. Yeah. But those accumulative minor defects really can add up.
Yeah.
And sometimes people just aren't up for renovating, up for the massive to-do list, or rebuilding a shower, or redoing windows because they're rotten, but they're not bad enough to make a major defect. So sometimes, you've got to call it, and you've got to go, wow, they're only minor defects, but they're accumulative.
And this is where it goes into the whole, do we do a building and pest inspection up front, where you can make a 100% educated decision on if you buy something or not, and you know everything, or you do a building and pest inspection, you do it subject to a building and pest inspection in a contract, where you can only get out if there's a major structural defect. So then the problem is that one major structural defect might cost $15,000, but 100 minor defects might cost $100,000.
Correct.
So it doesn't necessarily mean the more expensive, the easier to get out of the contract.
True.
It's something that buyers always have to be aware of. Something else like we haven't spoke about, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the T word to you, termites. I feel like that's probably that's one of the things that everyone's like, oh, termites are everywhere. They're everywhere. And everyone's freaking out about it. Like, how common are termites? How big of an issue are they? Like what?
They're always an issue in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Now, we provide, in our pest reports, we provide a map of Melbourne, which is provided by an external source as to where the termites are in Melbourne.
They like Melbourne.
They're literally everywhere.
They like Melbourne.
And you never know. I still get shocked when I find some. It's like gold prospecting, because we go through our process and we go, oh my God, I found some.
Yeah.
Eureka.
Yeah.
Exciting for us, breaks a lot of other people's hearts.
Yeah.
But we find them in places where I think I would never find termites here. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of their money. Why am I doing a termite inspection here? But we still do it. One example of that is a place in Laverton. I was in Laverton, and it was a 3-year-old townhouse. And I'm thinking, it's all MDF. There's no termites in here. It's new. There's probably there would have been a termite treatment done on the property because it's brand new construction.
And can I say something, jumping real quick? Everyone goes, oh, brand new. Sweet.
Yeah.
I don't have to do a building and pest inspection. You do.
You do.
Yeah. You're about to tell me why.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what I found was I'm running my moisture devices over the walls because you can't really tap too much. There's not a lot of timber in the place. And I'm picking up high moisture readings. Turns out the whole wall was full of termite.
Wow.
And when I got into the roof, I found all this white frass. It's termite poop is called frass. And it's normally brown.
Yeah.
And I was white. What's going on here? It blew my mind. And I got onto my entomologist who did all the training, and he's a very specialist in worldwide renowned.
Yep.
And he goes, oh, yeah, they'll eat the cellulose in the plasterboard.
Oh, no.
So that's exactly what was happening. That's why they had white frass.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they took out a fair chunk of a wall. They weren't even eating the timber framing because it was radiata pine, a little bit too green for them. But they'd made their way in. I'm not even sure how. I think they came in through maybe from the roof and came down because I handed it over to a pest controller after that. And, they were having a great time eating that 3-year-old townhouse in Laverton.
Imagine if you went and going, oh, all good, 3 years. How good's this?
Oh,
and that's it. Your naked eye doesn't pick that up.
No, you need equipment.
And that's exactly right. Doesn't matter how good you are. If you don't have the equipment, you don't know what you don't know.
They're subterranean termites, and that's what they're called. They don't come out into the dark and say, we're here.
Yeah.
And you'll only find them in a piece of timber if you lean up it and you go, oh, it's soft. What's going on there? So we use sanding tools. We use moisture detection. We use thermal imaging. We've got radars, all sorts of gadgets, and our big brains because we're all pest management technicians.
Yeah.
And, that's how we find them. And they're hard to find.
Well, years and years ago, we were at this property and it failed a building and pest inspection, and they said, oh, there's termites in there. But I couldn't believe it. It was like, this was like a top tier property in a suburb, like top sort of 2%, really expensive home. So it's turned all over, and I couldn't believe it. I went back to the property, and I remember they were telling me the areas where it was, and they're like, it's all in the timber floors. So I put my finger on one spot on the timber, on the hardwood floors, and pressed down, and it just was so flaky.
Yeah,
it just straight through.
See, this is why they eat. The termites will eat within the veneer.
Yeah,
and as soon as they get so close, like paper thin, they won't break through because that means that the light's going to come through. They want to stay in the dark.
Yeah.
So that they will eat right up to the paint in some instances.
Yeah. And that's where it's, I mean, you always do feel very awful for a vendor because often the vendors absolutely have no idea. Sometimes they do know and they're trying to sell their house for that reason.
Happens,
but often they've got no idea. I mean, that sounds like some of the worst sort of termite issues you can have. What's some of the worst structural problems you've found?
Well, worst structural problems would have to be subsiding footings.
Yeah.
Slab heave. What slab heave is you've got something like, I'll get a bit technical, say a waffle pod slab, which is a concrete slab.
Yeah.
If moisture gets under that slab, it'll heave up.
Yeah.
And effectively, in a lot of cases, a structural engineer will look at it and they'll say the house has to be demolished.
I've sold a house that had that problem. We didn't, it was, there was a tenant in the property, and we were agents, we'd always say, oh, do you want to, you always go to the tenant first. Do you want to buy the property? And they said, yeah, we'd love to buy the property. So we thought, oh, that's great. Obviously, don't have to inconvenience anyone for all these inspections. They want to buy it. Then they went cold on us and we're like, oh, where have they gone? And then they suddenly send us this building and pest inspection report. Obviously, they were in the property. They don't need to ask anyone for permission to get a building and pest report. And there was that exact issue. The house is literally falling apart. It's literally breaking in two.
Correct. Yeah.
And that was
pretty bad.
It was awful. So we took it to market, and then we worked out, okay, it's going to cost maybe $300,000. So we just took that off what we thought it was worth, and we got abused almost every day from some buyer. I think we were underquoting. It's like, we're not. And then we had to sell it for a massive reduced price.
Yeah.
The worst part about all of that is that when our vendors bought it, this will scare you, they bought it sight unseen. They never had seen it. They literally rocked up on the auction, bid, bought. Then they went in and had a look at it, thought it was fine, put tenants in it because it was an investment, and then only went to sell it 5 years later when we went in and sold it. We hadn't even seen it when we heard about the major defects, and they lost 200 grand.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's why I stress to every buyer, it's like investing, let's say the top end of the scale, $1,000 for the average house on a building and pest inspection, when you're spending $1 million is a no-brainer.
It's a drop in the ocean. You don't know. Like, we are going through so many methodical points to get you that little bit of information or that massive chunk of gold that you're just not going to know about.
You're not there to find out if the property's okay. You're there to find out if there's anything wrong with it. Yeah, exactly right.
And we're not talking about the good things. There might be a million great things about that property, but we're only talking about it's a defect report. So only talking about the defects.
Normally another question I get, and this is a bit of a weird one. I mean, buyers always go, oh, so it's like insurance. Like, I can get a building and pest inspection. Like, what's sort of the recourse if maybe something was missed? By the way, I just want to put a disclaimer. I've never had anything missed by you guys. I just want to put that out there. But it's a question I normally get, and it'd probably be great to let people know where everyone sits on that.
Well, we are human.
Yep.
We are methodical.
Yeah.
But the only time anything could get missed when you're doing a methodical process is if it's of concealment.
Yep.
So there are areas that we can't get into. Things are, couches get put in places, wall units get put in places. So I'm not saying that it's impossible to miss anything, to get everything. We can only do what we can do. But we've put everything in place so that we can do what we need to do.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of stories in the industry where a lot of things get missed by not doing that methodical process. And unfortunately for the home buyer, the only way to go back and to challenge that finding is by civil means with that particular inspector.
Yeah.
So it can get pretty nasty. So you want to choose your people well.
Exactly. That's the main point. If you're going to do a building and pest inspection, which you should do your own research as a buyer and find someone who is good. And that's why I put up on the TikToks and Instagram videos I do, like, if you need a building and pest inspector, reach out to me. I'll put you in touch with Colin, because even though there's nothing in that for me, I still feel a lot better knowing that they're getting looked after. And that's the main thing. Before we wrap up today's episode, I'd love for you to bust some sort of myth or give some sort of advice to every sort of home buyer in Melbourne that's looking at the moment for property. What's something you could tell them or some sort of information you give them?
Okay. So the one thing that I would say is, yes, get that building and pest inspection. You must do it. But the thing that people go into, we kind of touched on it before, was they're signing their contract. Oh, I'm safe, subject to building and pest.
Yeah.
No problem. They think that they can just walk away. They can't. The clause in those contracts is very specific.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can find a major defect, but they still can't get out of the contract.
Yeah.
Sometimes the clause says major structural defect.
Yeah.
Sometimes it says something completely different.
Yeah.
And if they're not getting advice from someone like yourself to advise them, oh, hang on, just check that clause.
Yeah.
It's not a guarantee that you're going to be able to walk away. So what we would often say to a lot of our buyers that aren't represented by someone like yourself is to, look, go to the property, like I said before, go to the property 2 times, 3 times, come back to us before you put pen to paper, before you sign that legally binding contract. Get us to go through. You'll have the report in 24 hours, and then you can make an informed decision.
Yeah.
Or get someone like yourself to help you through the whole process. It's a smart thing to do.
And it is 100%. What I say to all my clients is, we need to get a legal review on a contract before we consider offering subject to a building and pest.
Correct.
Because the clause, I've seen so many different variations, and the contract's prepared by the vendor. So of course the vendor, solicitor or conveyance is going to protect the vendor. That's their job. So what we need to make sure is that you're not signing a contract thinking, as you said, oh, I'm all good. I'm protected, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Only to find something seriously wrong and then not be able to get out of the contract.
I've even seen clauses where they put the termite clause in there to say we must find live termite in the property, not just termite damage. We can find all the termite damage, but unless we see a live termite that's concealed, because I can find termite in their wall, it doesn't mean that I can cut that wall open.
Spot on.
I can't do it. That's why we've got equipment. But if I don't find that live termite as they've specified in the contract, it can get pretty nasty.
Spot on. I think everyone listening to this episode, I would hope at least they've learned a whole heap about building and pest inspections. It is a must do to protect yourself when buying. Colin, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come here and educate home buyers in Melbourne. And we look forward to catching everyone on next week's episode.
Thank you.